Hi, Professor. This is KLozano, and this is my personal reflection video. Theme 1 was the values-driven organization development, and that's the focus that organizations should have on people versus economics. And I thought this was really interesting. I thought about the analogy. Why this is important to me is I thought of the analogy of sports. We're in the middle of the Olympics right now, and with sports, there's really two different things that are important. There's the team aspect of the sport, and then there's also whether or not they win or lose. And I think that's very similar to organizations in that, we can ask ourselves, like, are the teams cooperating? Are they enjoying being together? Are they working together? Or is there like a superstar? Or are they all working together? And organizational development, what really struck me is that it's important to help people, or to focus more on people and how they're working together versus winning or losing, which is sort of kind of like profit and loss and the economics of business. So, and from what I learned is that OD is really a response to kind of the top-down leadership style, and it's really more democratic. And to me personally, that actually goes a lot with my personality. In terms of my current level of mastery, I would give myself probably a pretty high score of like 9 out of 10 because personality-wise, I took a personality test once as a DISC, and I'm really high on the S, which is the collaborative, getting people together, making sure that everybody's voice is heard. That's really important to me, whether it's my family or work or whatever. Determining what I can do, specific actions to help further develop this. Sometimes when I get busy, I can tend to get super focused on my own thing and not necessarily consider others. And I'm going to remember to ask my coworkers, how my decisions are impacting them. And one way that I thought about an action plan for this is another example of something that I've done that I think I can relate to this is I actually have a post-it note on my desk that says CBDT, all in capital letters with a question mark, and it's to remind myself, could one of my coworkers is Vanessa, could Vanessa do this? So it's CVDT. And my supervisor actually asked me to consider this, to consider tasks that I might be able to delegate to her, because delegation is a weakness of mine. So I was thinking in this area, similarly, I could have a note that says HDTIO, which is how does this impact others? And I'm going to share that with my supervisor. So for theme 2, I loved Cotter's book. The 8-step change model was just revolutionary to me. I really thought that the components were easy enough to understand, but still profound and deep enough to really have the ability to transform organizations. I was really impressed. A lot of times we read theories and they're not necessarily as practical, or you don't always see the practical side of that. And I thought this one really had a lot of practical application. In terms of my mastery level, I'd give myself a 6 out of 10. I think I have a lot to learn in terms of practical application of this model. I love all the components. I still want to be able to refer to that model, and actually put it into practice a few times. One of the things, I think two of the areas that I have here, one is bringing together a guiding coalition. I'm not terribly great at identifying who needs to be on a guiding coalition in areas when it relates to change. I also think that I need to grow in generating short-term wins. For example, right now we have this huge project at work, and it's a pretty lofty goal that has been given to me. Read ridiculously unobtainable, but in retrospect, if I were to think about it, I think that we should have made some short-term wins along the way so that it didn't feel quite so unobtainable. And I'm actually going to reassess that goal and that project and see if I can. I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's come up as I've been learning in this class, that I need to set some short-term goals along the way so that once we achieve those, then it'll be easier to make it towards the larger goal. So I'm going to actually look at that project plan this week and assign some short-term wins. I'm going to talk to my supervisor and my team about that. And then for theme 3, I really loved the idea of emergent change and change management. And I liked the idea that emergent change is really about not only on the organizational level, but also on the individual level. To me, one of the biggest outcomes of this class has been just learning that change is ubiquitous. Life is change. And I think about like the example of even just a baby. You know, if you have I have two kids. They're 19 and 22, almost 23, and it's just amazing to me. Like, it's just flown by. But if either one of them, when they were babies, didn't grow, obviously there would have been a problem. And it's the same thing in organizations, churches, families, people, whatever it is. Change is inevitable, and whatever it is, whether it's an individual, organization, whatever, if it doesn't grow and change, then it's going to terminate or die. But I realize at the same time, I don't love change. I actually had on my Facebook status last week, I don't love change, because my boss actually asked me to start coming in an hour earlier. And my first initial reaction was, I was angry and I was frustrated, and I had all this like, I can't do it, like because I mean I had a feeling that I could do it, but I knew that it meant that I was going to cut out my 2 mile walk that I have in the morning with my husband and my dog, and I was like, I had some loss there. So I mean, that whole cycle of change that we studied, it's like I was all through that cycle. And then eventually, you know, I came to some acceptance, because I realized, oh, okay, well, if I just cut out this or rearrange that, or, you know, adjust some things in my schedule, I can make it happen. And lo and behold, a week later, I'm still getting my 2 mile walk in the morning, and I'm still getting to work an hour earlier. So it was amazing. I actually pulled it off. And the nice part is I'm actually I'm getting to work earlier, which means I'm getting off earlier, which means I have more energy in the evenings. I'm not so tired because I'm not getting home so late. So it's a win-win-win. So yeah, it was really interesting just on a microcosm level, just to see how the impact of change. Diagnosing my current level of mastery, again, I give myself about a 6. I don't love change. Most people don't. Yeah, but I think for me, it's about attitude, and accepting change really involves attitude about my change. So in terms of specific actions, when confronted with change, I'm going to ask myself what the benefits and the challenges are. And I really got this idea from the case studies. I loved breaking down what was going on in the different case studies, and having to identify the objections, the obstacles. So I think specifically identifying the challenges and how to address them makes the change less daunting and more doable. And I think in the same way that I did with my case studies, I think I'll actually make a little. I'm big on like pros and cons lists. Like, anytime I have a huge decision in my life, I usually make like a pro and con list. I actually once was going to move to Colorado, and I made a whole little matrix of like pros and cons, and I weighted them, and came out with a score of whether or not we should move. Nerd alert. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to share with my family that I'm going to be doing this. If change is on the horizon, I'm going to identify the challenges and obstacles, and just say, okay, how can we address these? So conclude with any additional thoughts on my learning journey here. And I'm so appreciative of everything I learned in this course. Change in life, professionally and personally, is not only inevitable, but vital to our very existence. And I read a great analogy, you've probably heard of it, about relating to the difference between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. Probably very familiar with this, but I was reminded of it this week, and I thought it was pretty cool. You have the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, and they're both fed by the Jordan River. And it's really interesting because the Sea of Galilee is just teeming with life. It provides irrigation for the surrounding agricultural area. And then you have the Dead Sea that is at the end of the Jordan River. There's no outlet. It doesn't provide any kind of sustenance for the people in the region. There's no life really in there. So even though they're fed by the same resource, the Jordan River, and they're only 65 miles apart, you know, the difference is that, you know, one has water flowing in and out, and the other one just is sort of a repository, and because of it, nothing grows there. So the takeaway is that, you know, shared resources allows it its waters to be used again, and in contrast, the Dead Sea kind of hoards its water, and as a result has become dead. The lesson for me is when it comes to business, I have to be flexible, adaptable, allowing resources to change and to flow through me rather than allowing myself to get to a stagnant place like the Dead Sea. And when I get stuck in ideas, instead of thinking like, oh well, this is the way we've always done it, having that attitude, doesn't really allow fresh ideas to flow through me, kind of like the Jordan River. So just challenging myself to be better about, accepting change as it comes and whatnot. Thank you so much for the opportunities to learn and grow in this class. I loved the case studies. I loved Cotter, the NTL book. It was all great. And thank you so much.